is going on, Internet? Eric Bandholz back again with another e-commerce conversations. I hope all is well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of the Internet from me is you. Welcome back. We got another masterclass, and really, I think this is probably going to be the most important episode I think you should listen to. Like, if you listen to one episode, I'm glad that this is one of them. I'm kind of getting into a lot of theory behind entrepreneurship, how to build your business, how you should think about building your business, the mistakes that you can make, how to not make them if you haven't started your business yet, how to not do that, and then understanding if you have made those mistakes, maybe what is that pathway out of it, how you might be able to get to the next level. So first things first, these are the mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they build their business. Number one is not really building a business with intention and purpose. And I'm going to lean into, there's a ton of different ways to build a business. And I'm going to focus on the way that I'm trying to build a business, which is basically, I want to do the things I want to do with the people who I want to do them with when I want to do them. And basically, you can think of that as building a business that gives me the freedom to do the things that I want in life. There are other people who are building a business to do, remarkable things. For example, Elon's trying to get people onto Mars and transition life to, solar energy from whatever else. All these like big motives, I think those are great things. But if that's your North Star, which he has a North Star for, it's going to guide you to make decisions a little bit differently than the way I'm trying to build a business. There's some other great podcasts, the Operators podcasts with Sean Frank, Mike Beckham, who are very capable entrepreneurs who have built, frankly, they've built great businesses, large businesses, and they've done it in ways that typically kind of align with what I want to do as well. But I think maybe their focus is more on the growth of the business at the expense of some other things. And I don't really want to say that. I think they're just, as I look at the way they've built their businesses, I think they're just more competent entrepreneurs than I am. And part of the journey of being an entrepreneur is also understanding that, what Sean Frank does with Ridge Wallet, or what Moise did with Native, or what Mike's done with Simply Modern and the Cup, they are remarkable things. They're kind of that one in 100,000, one in a million type of businesses. And those are guys that it's easy to get inspired by, but also, I don't think we ever fully understand how brilliant they are, because the things they do just seem so easy to them, or how dedicated they are, or how perseverant they are, or how obsessed they are for their business, and whether or not what you see with them building in those businesses end up becoming distractions from other aspects of their life. I don't know that answer, because you're going to get a filtered view, but I also feel like those guys are pretty good about being real. So with that being said, I kind of err more on the side of like less drama in my life, more freedom, with growth, with more employees, with larger businesses, you have more lawsuits, you have more employee issues, you have more drama. And so I try to keep my drama pretty low. So you're going to enjoy this podcast if you align with that. If you align with this idea of building a business of freedom that allows you to do the things that you want. If your goal is something else, building a remarkable business, making tons of money in a short period of time, and then on to the next thing, this is not going to be the podcast for you. Now, the first mistake people make when they're trying to build a business that allows you the most freedom is chasing money, not margins. Money is, it's funny. I look back into my life. I'm in my mid-40s now. Money has never been an issue in my life. It's always been there. And it's not always been there because I've had a ton of money. My first job, I was making something like $11 an hour, working at a call center at Dell. My parents are, upper middle class people. Like we grew up in the suburbs of South Carolina, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but there was no investments from them into Beardbrand other than them supporting the business and buying products and supporting me and being loving parents. So I did not come from money. I do not have a ton of money. I have built through, like good fortune and hard work, the life that I have. And I've even when I was making $11 an hour, I never struggled for money because money's a simple thing to me. It's you have a certain amount of money coming in and you have a certain amount going out. And as long as you have more coming in than going out, you're always going to have enough. So when times get tough and I've got less money coming in, which has happened many times, then I make sure less money goes out. And when I have more money coming in and times are good, I make sure that I put a lot of that money into savings. And with that savings, I can use it for rough times down the future. Which brings me into the future mistake, or alludes to the future mistake that I want to talk about down the road, about kind of like the time value of money, and more particularly time. So more money will never solve your problems if you think you have a money problem. When this comes to the application of your business, you need to think about chasing margins, not chasing money. So more money is not going to solve your problem, but more margin very much will save your problem, solve your problem. So what does that mean? How do we figure out how to lower the cost of production of our products? And then how do we figure out how we might be able to generate additional revenue for those products? Those are basically the two levers that you have. Make it less expensive and sell it for more money. I guess the third lever would be becoming a more efficient marketer. And I think like becoming a more efficient marketer is the thing that most entrepreneurs think about. That's where their mind is like, oh, how do I do Facebook ads? How do I do Google ads? How do I do SEO marketing? How do I do AI? How do I reach more people? And, gradually all those channels get more and more and more expensive over time and erode that margin. So as much as you think about how to acquire new customers cost effectively, you need to think about how do I lower my COGS? How do I build those supply chains that make it more efficient? And then how do I make a product so valuable that people would be willing to invest more money into that product than they're currently paying? Now, I think another problem that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is when they have a product that is low margins, they feel like they can't get rid of it. Let's say you can't cut your COGS anymore. Let's say you can't drive higher revenue for it because it's commoditized. Let's say it is very expensive to acquire new customers to that product. It is of my belief that even if it's making all of your money from a top line, if it's not driving bottom line, it's not worth having. You're just doing work for nothing. So it's important for you to be willing to change directions and kill products that don't make money. Now, it's not to say you immediately do that, because as entrepreneurs, we tend to be tinkerers. You have to give it the time to see if you can lower those costs, see if you can raise the prices, see if you can acquire customers less expensive. But if you can't, at the end of the day, there's no point carrying products that don't make you money. You have to be intentional. You have to be purposeful. You have to chase those margins to make sure that the products you offer are going to allow your business to be sustainable. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, well, I don't want to say entrepreneurs. I think there's a tendency for entrepreneurs, and maybe it's because of the pressure that we're getting hit up all the time to get a loan, to get financing, to fund inventory, to get there's all this access to free money that is their first solution to it. And I think your first solution to be building a business should be like, how do I do this without getting money? So let's say you need to launch a product. It's going to cost $100,000 to launch a product. The old school way is you go to get an SBA loan, you go to your bank, you get a loan, maybe you ask your friends and family for some money, maybe you get some investment from a VC firm, something like that. You get that money, you put all that money into the product, you put all this money into launching it, you launch it, and then you sell the product. That's kind of the old school way. And even now, this is not really new ways, but Kickstarters are out there. So rather than chase money and raise all this money, what you do is you chase the margins. So we think about how do we turn the way that the cash flow is working. So rather than going into debt, either through equity is not really debt, but equity financing or debt financing, you can have customer financing, and customers are paying for the product. So not only are you getting real world information and data points about your products and how it's performing in the marketplace, you're also mitigating a lot of that upfront risk. So you're able to make the cash flow kind of work for you, and you're able to maintain ownership of your business, and you're also able to lower drama by not introducing the debt payment, maybe personal guarantees that you might have to put on the line to get money from the banks. In addition to that, you're being more efficient because you do not have to pay, a percentage of fees for debt financing, and you're not going to have third parties come in and kind of start dictating the way you should be running the business. So thinking creatively how you might be able to generate the capital necessary to solve the problem without giving up equity or debt is going to be something that I highly recommend that you guys do. Now, the other thing is, let's say you've really convinced yourself the only way that you can build this business is to raise money or is to get debt financing. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's absolutely true. You cannot build SpaceX without getting money from somebody else. My challenge to you, if this is your situation, is, are there any other businesses that you could build that you could do? Are there any other products you could produce? Maybe you can produce a product that you can produce in small batches. Beardbrand was started making like 100 units of beard oil literally in my kitchen. And we were able to start in a way that I could self-fund it. And my business partners, all of us, we could self-fund it. So we were able to not spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to get the business off the ground. In today's world, with Shopify, with all the apps out there, with Alibaba and networks and trade shows, it is very realistic that you can start any kind of business, any kind of niche business that will give you the potential to build a life of freedom. And the point I want to make is, you are going to give up something. Let's say you have that great idea that requires a lot of investment. Let's say that great idea can grow to be a $100 million business. It's huge potential. That's a valid option. Again, but this podcast is not for those people. This podcast is for the people who want freedom. So once you start taking money from investors, once you start getting debt financing, you're no longer making decisions on behalf of you and your needs. You're making decisions and your customers' needs. You're making decisions based on the behalf of your investors or the requirements to satisfy your debt payment. And that's when you start putting things on sales or launching products that don't really fit your mission and your vibe and what you're trying to build within the business. So you're no longer chasing freedom, and you're becoming a slave to your business. So I want you to think about the real risk in following this pathway of money versus margins is you are building a business that you can become a slave to. And being attached to a business that you can't get rid of, let me tell you, is not going to be something that's very enjoyable. So make those decisions with intention at the beginning. If you can think about other products that you can produce or other creative ways to fund it, actually do it. Like, I would say you have to do that. That is one of the rules of building a business of freedom. You have to constantly remind yourself throughout your entire journey of building the business. Why am I doing this? Going back to the very beginning of this podcast, what is your purpose of this business? Remind yourself, what is the philosophy of this business? Are we building this business for freedom? Are we building this business to make a ton of money? Are we building this business for ego reasons to get on the cover of, magazines or the front page of Reddit or whatever it is? You have to understand that. And in those trying times, when you understand, hey, I'm building this for freedom, that means I need to say no to this and reallocate my focus to what I'm building. Because I want to say the next mistake that people are making is they have too short term of a vision for what they're trying to build and not enough long-term vision. I think there's a high pressure based on conversations, based on celebrations of other entrepreneurs. The sale is always celebrated. It is very easy to be like, oh, hey, John Doe just sold his business for XYZ $1 million. Congratulations, well done. You've done it. You've made it. That's your Super Bowl. Hooray. And as entrepreneurs, you see these messages constantly. And these messages are being beat into your head that you build a business and you sell it. And if you're really good, you build it and you sell it in 1 or 2 or 3 years. And you make, 8 figures or 9 figures or even 7 figures. And then you coast off into whatever, and then you have all the freedom to do whatever you want in your life. And maybe for some people that's fun. But I would encourage you to instead think longer term. And you're going to be like, okay, well, I'll think about, I'm going to build a business over 5 years or 10 years and then sell. I want you to think longer than that. You'll be like, okay, well, I'm going to build a business until I'm ready to retire. And then, it'll pay my retirement. I'll do whatever I want to do in retirement. And again, I want you to think longer term. I want you to think about how can you build a multi-generational business? How can you build something like that? What does that look like? What is it going to take to have that kind of sustainability? To have a business that could last, 50 or 100 years? How could you build a business that could last beyond your lifetime? What are the things that you need to do? And I think one of the most important things that you need to do is enjoy working in and on the business. You need to enjoy showing up to work every day. And how do you enjoy showing up to work every day? Well, the big thing is you make money. So you have products that have margins that pay for it. So you have more cash coming in than going out. That is very much that is one of the most enjoyable parts of having a business, making more money than you're spending. It is not very enjoyable when you're going the opposite direction. So if that's the case, if you're spending more money than you're making right now, you have to think and figure out ways to reallocate those cash flows. If that means downsizing your team, if it means cutting on profitable products, cutting on profitable channels, humbling your lifestyle at home, selling your house, moving to a smaller house, selling an expensive car that maybe you have a car payment on. You have to do those things to make sure that you're cash flow positive, because once you do that, business is going to be more enjoyable. And then again, the people that you want to work with. So do you like working with your team members? I think one of the beauties of being an entrepreneur is we get to choose who we work with. What other places do you have to do that? Most people are, beholden to the whims of the place they work for. But as an entrepreneur, you get to be like, I want to work with you. I want to work with you. You're super cool. You're super smart. You're super brilliant. Come on board. Come and work with me. And if there are people on the team who maybe they're great people, super talented, but you don't like working with them, you got to let them go. And there's no shame in that. You can do that. I think that, again, goes back to the advantages of having a small business, where small business is not relegated to the same regulatory burdens that a larger business has. Once you start getting up, I think it's like 50 employees, and you have all the EEOC requirements. And but as a small business, you'd be like, I just don't like you. I want to fire you. You're not going to be part of the team. And that's well within your rights. Whereas larger companies don't have that kind of freedom. And to be fair, probably once you get to a larger team, you're not interacting with all 50 people or 100 people or however big your team is. You tend to just be working with a small select few, probably, your C-level team. So I would imagine that you would want those people to be enjoyable to be around as well. And maybe you could argue that as part of performance that, they're not a good fit, but it's just you got to document it. To me, that's not the fun part of business. Regulatory burdens is not why I got into the business. So think about the longer term. Think about how can I build a business that my kids could take over? And then when you think about that, it's like, all right, well, I want to get my kids integrated into this business. I want them to figure out, find a way that they could love it. Not a way that they feel a burden to take it over. And I think that's the thing you have to think about. Multi-generational is like, man, if my kids absolutely loved working on this business and they take it over, and that they could have a similar life that I had, one of their own choosing. How amazing could that be, that not only did you build this business that allowed you and your family to live a great life, but your children and their families. And how do you set it up in a way that maybe if you have multiple children, that they're going to be able to resolve the differences in a healthy way? And you start thinking about that as a multi-generational business, and as a dad or a mom building this business and linking the family into it, I think it presents a really unique way to build a remarkable nuclear family. And it forces you to find that balance in your life to obviously build a great business, but also to build great relationships with your spouse and your children. Because if you can't build a multi-generational business if you and your children are butting heads when they're adults. So like to minimize that, you have to spend time with your kids. And spending time means being away from your business. So that long-term pathway is, all right, well, I need to invest in my children to have them continue on this business and giving them the kind of life that is possible out there. So this long-term time frame. But you think about it, long-term. Let's think long-term, man. I'm in my mid-40s. My kids are young for my age. I only have my youngest is 5-year-old, and God willing, I'll have another one. But how do I keep up with my kids as I get older? How do I stay witty with them? How do I play sports with them? Not only that, my grandkids are probably going to be pretty young when I'm old. So how do I, as a 70-year-old or an 80-year-old, how do I have that energy and focus? And the way I do that is by investing in my health and investing in my mental process and making sure that my body is going to be able to be there for my kids and my grandkids as I get older. And I think a lot of people, maybe they have a long-term vision for their business, but they don't have a long-term vision for their life. Or maybe they have a long-term vision for their life and they over-index in their health, but they're not thinking about the business. There's always trade-offs. So what I wanted to do is kind of share the balance that I've found in my life and some of the tips that I've had for that. So I personally, right now, I'm working out 6 times a week. 3 days are lifting, 3 days are rowing. I have built a home garage gym. So the commute time to my garage is seconds. Those seconds are valuable. When you are trying to do a lot of things, you need to think about unique ways to solve the problems. So what do we need in life? We need our needs met. We need to stay physically active. Building a home gym, in my opinion, has been one of the greatest investments that I've had. To be able to lift, inconsistently or at inconsistent times. Sometimes I lift in the morning. Sometimes I lift, at lunchtime. Sometimes I lift in the evening. And if I went to a public gym, and there's a lot of values for public gyms. I'm not throwing shade at them, but if I did it at that, then, maybe all the machines that I wanted would be filled because it's right after work, or, maybe that commute takes a lot of time away from doing things with family. For instance, I was lifting on Wednesday after work, and in between exercises, my wife had dinner, and I came in, ate dinner, and then I went back to lifting. And, if I had to go to the gym, I just would have missed family dinner. So you have that kind of flexibility by building those kind of things. But sometimes people need accountability. How is that accountability? Encourage, friends, spouses, kids, depending on how old your kids are, to engage in those activities. Rowing for me is a little bit of that friendship outlet. I think friends are an important part of society, and having peers that you can talk to outside of your spouse is a very important thing. And to be able to double up that friendship and fitness, I think, is one of the best hacks in life. So think about how you can kind of hit two birds with one stone. I think like that's how your mindset needs to go. Because if I'm just doing my fitness by myself, and then if I just have my friend time by myself, and then I just have my spouse time by myself, and then my kid time by myself, and then the needs of the business, I'm not going to be able to fit it all in. And one of the hacks, or the biggest hack in life, is being able to double up that. Other things that I do in my life beyond fitness is going to be more like pleasure or mental health. Is we like to go to Denmark every summer for an extended period of time. We take the whole family. It's not a vacation. It's a, work remote or work while I'm in a different location. And it sparkles my spirit of adventure. And it satiates a need. And for some people that's travel. For some people it's a hobby. For some people, it's working on their yard. There's so many different ways to spark your interest in life. And I think it's important that you do it, that you make the time and you allocate the time. I want to live a life of adventure. I want to do things that are not routine or ordinary. I don't feel like I need to be constrained by the same, society constraints that the majority of people have. I think, God, I understand people have challenges in life where they have to work a certain job. They have to, put their kids in public school. They have to stick to the school schedule. But once you unchain that, and once you understand that I want to do the things that I want to do when I want to do them with the people I want to do them with, then that changes your perspective on everything. Like, why are your kids in public school? Why are you limiting yourself to your school schedule? How do you figure out how to get your kids in a school environment that you're allowed to travel when you want, where you want? Funny enough, the problem I have with my kids' school isn't that we can't travel whenever we want, because we can. I can take them out for 6 weeks, and they're fine with that. There's no attendance records. The beauty of private schools. But the downside is my daughter goes to a school that she enjoys, and she doesn't want to miss out. She wants to do the things at school. So, and as she gets older, I feel like that's going to be more of the case. Like as your children get older, they want to start spending more time with friends. That it gets harder to take them on family trips for extended periods of time. Certain aspects are, you have to recognize that you're in the present and be in the moment and do the things that you want to do, because you may miss them, but also do it in a way that allows you to be sustainable, that allows you to serve your body, to serve your mind, to serve your business, to serve your spouse, to serve your children, to serve your friends and family. You have to take consideration all of those. I've done, in a moleskin notebook, I wrote down all the things that are important to me. And not only did I do that, I prioritize it. And I know it's hard for people to say, my kids come before my business, but do they actually, if your kid is sick, are you going to be able to do that? I was on X and I read about how, Zuckerberg was, not able to originally commit to being at the birth of his children because something at work came up. And to be fair, like, he may prioritize his business. That may be high on his list. And I think there are guys that do that. And I'm not here to throw shade or to judge. I think that's, if you understand your priorities and that's what it is, then that's what it is. Something may come up and they may need to attend to it. Personally, I think family should take a higher priority. But again, this is your life, the one of your own choosing. So you get to choose how you allocate that. Build that list. Don't have equals. You can't have equals. You can't have priorities. If you're given that choice between, the needs of your spouse and the needs of your kids, and they're at a conflict, you have to choose. For me, I choose my spouse, and above that, I choose my own health and my own mentality. Because if I'm not here, how can I be a good husband? How can I be a good father if I'm dead, or if I'm incapacitated, or if I'm miserable, I'm grumpy? How is that going to help them? So you have, in my opinion, you have to invest in yourself. And a lot of people feel like that's selfish. And I want to tell you that, think of it, if you're a spiritual person, which ironically I would say I'm spiritual, but I'm not dogmatic religious. Think of that connection with a higher being, a higher power. And that investment in yourself, in that relationship with that higher power, is that investment in yourself. And that should be kind of the top of your list. And then from there, in my opinion, it's your spouse, your kids, your immediate family. And then maybe from there, it could be your business. Yeah, that could be above your friends. Probably is above your friends. And then your friends, and then strangers, people you don't even know, in different countries. That's how I prioritize it, bluntly. You can do it differently. I would highly recommend, your kids are going to be out of your house one day. I would highly recommend that your spouse take that highest priority after yourself. That can be quite controversial for some people. But your kids are going to leave the house, like the life you're building. You choose your wife or your husband, and that choice is intentional, and that choice should be with utmost care, in my opinion. Anyways, I went kind of like a little bit off business, and I think that's what's important with this podcast, is understanding that you need to find that balance in your life. You need to figure out ways to build multi-generational, to make multi-generational decisions. I mean, how cool would it be to just level up your family name, where your children are able to continue on your legacy, not because they're forced to or they have to, but because it excites them. And it excites them because they can also build their own legacy and kind of stack up the success that you've had and have multi-generational success. Anyways, this has been another e-commerce conversations. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Well, I'm just sitting here talking to you, sharing my thoughts. Cheers. Keep on growing.